Hello everyone, and welcome to this Certero webinar on how to create future-proof Shadow SaaS and discovery and management processes. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple of introductions first. My name is Dan Whitefield, and I'm one of our technical consultants. I'm an experienced software asset manager and a certified FinOps practitioner, and I've been in the industry now for near on 15 years in both the reseller and luckily enough to be with Certero for the last 5 years. And I'm currently helping our customer base follow through with their long-term strategic goals as a customer success manager. Hi, Joe.
Hi everyone. I'm Joseph Lobo. I'm a consultant and I've been working in the ITAM/SAM managed service space for nearly 15 years. I started out in the UK and moved across to Dallas, Texas, where I am now, about 7 years ago. More recently, I've taken a keen interest in helping our customers reduce unexpected spend.
Perfect. So thanks for that, Joe. Just going to give a little rundown of how this webinar is going to go. So first of all, we'll look at um, two parts to the webinar essentially. So first of all, around the growing concern of Shadow SaaS, and then how to address that problem and what it would look like potentially in a perfect world. Then we'll ask you guys on the call today to get involved in a little poll. Then we'll look at some technology and how Certero can help to help you identify things that you don't know around the Shadow SaaS areas through SaaS discovery. And then we'll field any questions from you guys that are on the webinar today. Okay. So first of all, let's start talking about this growing concern. And we're going to move through this first part of the webinar with myself and Joe having a conversation about what we've seen out there in the industry. So we've all heard about Shadow SaaS and how that affects our organisations, but maybe we'd like to give you some talk about the approaches and the solutions and how we can proactively manage your Shadow SaaS, as well as identifying some anecdotes that you would probably find interesting and useful. So, Joe, do you want to give us start us off on this?
Yeah, so we've got some interesting stats here. The first one from Gartner. So 75% of employees will acquire, modify, or create technology outside of IT's visibility. A couple of other stats there around, how fast SaaS has grown in the past few years. Back in 2008, Gartner reported that worldwide revenue for SaaS applications was about 6.4 billion. Recently, in 2004, it's just surpassed 243 billion. So an explosion of companies, enterprises using SaaS applications. A lot of this has been attributed to, well, a lot of the increase has been attributed to post 2019, 2020 after the COVID crisis, which kind of makes sense. A lot of companies looking to get their remote workers using certain services. I think today on average, the mean average, the average stack of SaaS applications in an organization is about 270. We're also seeing average spend in the ballpark, depending on how big the organization is, between $3,000 and $8,000 per employee. So obviously a massive growth in the industry, and there's a big blind spot where employees and end users can go outside of the business process and potentially cause certain risks for the company.
Yeah, so I mean, those are some amazing numbers that you throw out there, Joe. Right, and it's it makes sense. It does make sense that this stuff is all taking a real explosion in on the back of the COVID crisis. A couple more that I've got for you as well, which were at the start of 2023. Right, we were seeing 30,000 SaaS vendors out there. But by predictions going to the end of 2024, it's going to increase to 72,000 SaaS vendors. And actually, over a third of those creating technology around productivity or e-commerce applications, which is, a massive slice of the pie there, when you think about the spend that's going into that. So what we're going to look at now over the next couple of slides is the IT issues that come with this, as well as the security problems that this technology starts to give companies within this world. So how do we address the problem, and what is it about? So first of all, we've got, as we know, generally SaaS usage and applications are used by people, so it's essentially a people problem. We do know that people want to do generally the right thing and do it with integrity. So calling it Shadow SaaS, for example, sort of alleviates the fact that we refer to it as this shadow thing, where it's not all bad, right? The processes and applications out there are really driving companies forward, and it's just about how we can use our policies and procedures to catch up with that drive that we're seeing across the organisations today.
Yeah, and I think policies and procedures you can kind of split into two buckets, in that you want your employees to follow a certain procurement process, and they want to understand why they need to follow that process. But also in regards to detection of SaaS applications, a good place to start is browser data. You can see from there where end users are going out and touching certain websites and getting certain services. So having a standard browser, a gold image of a browser that doesn't have something like an incognito mode enabled on it, will allow that history file to be read, and then that metadata can be then gathered by a SAM tool and analyzed to see what people are going out and doing. Also, I think financial information is quite important there, because you're kind of looking at one side of the coin with just the I guess inventory data, or discovery data. Financial information can hide all manner of sin, really, in how people are procuring SaaS solutions. So looking at expense reports, seeing if stuff is miscategorized, and then we have the tools and technology itself. So really having a single pane of glass that links together all that information in a way that is automated is really useful to ITAM professionals.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great point to pick up on there, Joe, because I think that, from our traditional areas as IT asset managers and software asset managers, we are now tasked with this world of software as a service, right? And it's something that we need to integrate ourselves with, and potentially use some of our skills and experience that we've already got and just morph it into these areas that we can see today. Okay, so next, really what we want to sort of give you an idea of is the balancing act that the organisations are facing at the moment. So we've talked about those business needs, where the problem comes from. Okay, we've talked about the need, and the reason why people are using SaaS applications, and that's the ease of getting to these areas and driving forward business processes, but also that balancing act of the governance that comes around that. And generally, we might see this as the IT world not being perceived as necessary in the process of acquiring software, or the fact that our users and our SaaS users are getting ahead of the IT departments and the processes that are in place currently. And there's a big risk around that with the use of software as a service applications, and that's around the permissions that are needed to be able to monitor the activity, and more often than not, those privileges that come with those SaaS applications, and they can carry real security risks around them that are debatably more significant than the costs of the SaaS applications that we're hoping to capture and manage. So essentially, in the world of security, right, we want to reduce the attack surface, if you like, and clearly you don't want to make it bigger. So you do need some policies and procedures around that, and for your teams to be aware of the privileges that are out there in the wide, where potentially things like your keystrokes and passwords could be captured. And being mindful and understanding of what this is will certainly help both the individuals and the organisations make the correct decisions when it comes to this balancing act.
And I think this slide is quite apt because we were talking about an example that Dan and I were both on the call with a company that had just received a letter from a SaaS provider called Anaconda, asking them for a six-figure, I think renewal for their SaaS subscription, and the procurement and ITAM team were completely unaware of this renewal. And what basically happened is developers had downloaded this Anaconda solution, and within the click agreement for it, there's a piece of terminology that says if your company has more than 200 employees, then you need to get a corporate license. And essentially, what the company was doing, what the SaaS provider was doing, was going through the domain names of all the people who had downloaded their software and then cross-referencing it to the size of the company so they could Google, and then just sending out these letters. And kind of similar to what's happening with Oracle Java earlier this year, just quite a good passive way of getting revenue. But what struck me about that case is, for this instance, that the software was actually really good. The developers really needed it. It was mission critical, and the company decided to go ahead with the renewal. So back to your point, Dan, people generally want to do the right thing. This stuff is kind of what the developers needed to make their line of business function. The issue was, when I started investigating this online to see if other companies had been impacted by it, was I found a forum where developers were complaining about their managers and their procurement department, saying they can't use Anaconda, and they were saying, oh, they don't understand innovation, they don't understand data like us. And really, that kind of illustrates the kind of disconnect and the miscommunication around policy. Is that the idea of the policy is to just make sure that that software is procured in the right way, and that it enables the business to do what it needs to do, and that those policies need to be communicated correctly to the end users, so that you don't get any surprises in your budget.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great story, Joe. And I think we were, like you say, we were both sort of a little bit shocked by that on the call, and to see what was happening, but also understand from both sides of the coin, right? From an organisation's perspective, they need to get this balancing act right. They need to put guardrails in place, right, to protect themselves against this sort of stuff. But also from the vendor perspective, at the end of the day, if people are using the software and the applications to drive their business forward, then certainly in those cases, then they're going to want to recuperate some of that money. So, as I say, from both sides, we can see this is certainly a growing problem, if you like, and people just need to understand it and manage it in the right way. Okay, so really talking about addressing that problem, and you've really, what we want to understand is what we don't know, and because you cannot manage what you can't see, as you can see on this screen here, right? And just picking up on what we said earlier, Joe, is around, let's use our software asset management experience in this software as a service world now. What we're hearing a lot from our customers is the areas around SaaS applications, and wanting to find out what they are, just so that they can manage them, which you gave a great overview of in the previous slide. But certainly, we want to have a drive within organizations to regain control over both the data and the security issues that we're seeing currently. So one way to do that would be, I suppose, to really look at as you mentioned earlier there, Joe, the browsers that you're using within your organisations, and perhaps things like browser extensions, etc., and really understanding and delving into those areas to know what you should do about it. And we're going to be looking at that in the next slide. But definitely, if you've got some bits and pieces to say around addressing this problem and interrogating vendors when it comes to these areas.
Yeah, so I think the best way of thinking about vendor interrogation is kind of splitting up the purview of the ITAM team into three buckets. You have the the IT department, which is, if you have a reasonably proactive ITAM program, you know what they're going to be spending their money on. You have the different departments and lines of business underneath that, elsewhere around the company. Again, with a proactive ITAM program, you kind of know what they're spending their money on. The problem is the third bucket, which is the end users and how they're going about procuring software. So part of this inventory is about interrogating, for example, expense reports to see where people are putting subscriptions for, say, Adobe Acrobat down as meals, it being miscategorized. And then all of a sudden you can see on a regular monthly basis, this person's having a meal of Adobe Acrobat Creative Cloud complete suite, So with a simple bit of fuzzy logic, you can start to identify those anomalous bits of spend that are coming out of the budget there, and it's not to be underestimated, because across the whole company it all adds up.
Excellent. I mean, to be honest with you, Joe, did make me chuckle there. A regular meal on Adobe would certainly be interesting, right? So
Sounds
really
delicious.
good, really good observation there. Okay, so next up we've got you know, really, how do I restrict the scope of this Shadow SaaS, Shadow IT? And we touched on it a little bit in the last slide, which is what do I need as a user, as an end user, to be able to get to these applications? And the answer to that really is you're going to need to access the internet, and you're going to need to access the internet through a web browser. So whether or not you've got technology out there currently, right, the first thing that organisations should maybe be looking at is to establish an approved web browser policy that they can then manage themselves internally. The security teams can do certain things around that. I think you mentioned earlier on, right, Joe? You've got like the ability to restrict things like incognito mode, etc., so that you can actually see what your users are getting at. If you do have a piece of technology, but even if you don't, you should be pushing those policies and procedures out to your end users. And the other thing that you've got within here is things like browser extensions, right? And we know that they contain uh, really sort of sensitive information around single sign-on details, login details, as we mentioned before, keystrokes and stuff like that. So essentially, if you can create a policy around that, and then get a piece of technology that can actively enforce your web browser policies that you've got, as well as pull back information around your web browser extensions that you can go and investigate from a security perspective. So, I think that we talked about this previously, Joe, where there's a there's a browser extension that I've been using, which was a capture screen, right? So rather than having a web page and screenshotting every piece of that web page and stitching it together, there's actually somewhere where you can actually pull the whole screen into one image, which is great, right? From a user perspective, helps you with writing reports and adding bits and pieces into your documents at speed, and therefore being more productive. However, when you start looking deeper into these sorts of things, you can see, well, these screen captures might be being stored somewhere. So you can go and look at your previous screen captures, but you don't know where they're being stored. Is it potentially a breach or a security consideration to go and look at those sorts of things? And these are all the questions that we need to start asking ourselves as as organisations that are security conscious around SaaS applications.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So I think when we talk about risk in regards to SaaS applications, there's two things. There's the financial risk of going outside of the procurement policy, but also there's the information security risk, which you just alluded to. So and again, we had a quite, I guess, almost rewarding call with a customer the other day. um, I think over the past few weeks there was quite a big hack in the news where essentially a phishing scam was being sent out to companies in a certain sector, and once someone in that company clicked on the website within that email, then essentially they'd be redirected to another website where there would be essentially a tunnel that would give hackers access to a vulnerability on that system. And we were talking to one customer that had basically used our solution and essentially just plugged in that website and found that in one of their remote offices, someone had clicked on that website, and they were quite rapidly able to gather that information and get it across the infosec department quicker than the infosec department could detect it, um, for it to be analyzed, and those machines in that remote office scanned. So it can be quite a powerful tool to understand this data.
I mean, great story there about that thing, and I think that drives home, right, the usage of these sorts of tools, right? So, when you're talking about an infosec team that got security tools just for themselves, is there anything else where end users become aware of a potential breach and then can report that back to their own organizations without having to go through red tape and hoops to get to that data? So really, really good story around, how you can use tools and technologies to help people in an organisation that are security conscious, right? So absolutely great. Okay, so I think that we will sort of look at what a perfect world and the SaaS discovery process could be, if we were all, in that area where we're looking at things from a holistic perspective. So the first step we'd want to do is to get visibility. So, we'd want to get some data into a piece of technology or a tool, to then start understanding what those particular SaaS applications are. Then you'd want something to perhaps, automatically categorize those applications so that you can start having buckets of different areas and understanding what these tools are used for, with the ability to potentially rationalize or consolidate your applications as well. Then you'd want to decide whether to add those to things like prohibited lists, or approve and manage that particular piece of software as a service, or even investigate further, because you need to delve into some of the end user license agreements, like you described, Joe, in that previous example there, where developers are using this to drive us forward, but we all need to understand that from a holistic perspective, and then that drives you really into the management of these applications. Okay, so next up we've got essentially our key takeaways.
Yeah. So Shadow IT is a people and policy issue. So like again, Dan mentioned, people want to do the right thing. They need to be made aware of what good looks like in terms of acquiring and using software. Automated SaaS discovery is essential. Uh, yeah, absolutely. The amounts of data needed to ID potential risks is pretty significant. And having a tool that can alert you of breaches of where people have gone outside of policy is vital. Security policy must include SaaS. Yeah, we're at the point now where we need to tie knowledge and processes of ITAM and SAM in with this new world of large amounts of SaaS apps in our application stack. So as always, you can't manage what you can't see. So having a policy that captures this is crucial as well. And then having SaaS discovery technology that integrates with the rest of the ITAM and SAM into a single pane of glass just makes life so much easier. And also you can link several different types of data together to give you a more holistic picture of what's going on in your estate.
Super. Well, thanks, Joe. I think that's a great summary of the key takeaways there. And what I think we'll do now is just jump into what we're going to show from a technology point of view today. So if I hop into the next slide, this one here shows what we do as part of a unified platform within Certero. Okay, so you can see that we've got, ITAM and SAM products here. We've got Certero for SaaS, which we'll come on to in a moment. We've even got a cloud asset management tool, or a FinOps tool called Vitardo, as well as an IT operations management products over here as well. If we just focus on the software as a service products, essentially we've got these into two areas, right? So we've got our tier one mega vendors, if you like, so things like 365, Salesforce, Creative Cloud, where we can hook in to those vendor APIs and pull back lots and lots of data around, people that are using it, usage, identification of products, bundling of products and stuff like that, and really drive optimization around that spend. And then over on the right hand side here, you've got all of your all the rest of your stuff that you can't see. So from a SaaS discovery perspective, what would that entail? And within Certero, because we use a concept of agents to pull back in inventory under ITAM and SAM, then we can use those same agents that are already out there on existing customers' environments to pull back lots of information around browsers, applications, websites that people are visiting, as well as those browser extensions that we talked about as well earlier. So we're going to look at the technology in just a moment, but before that, I just wanted to open up a poll so that you guys that are on the call today, would you be able to answer us in one of the three areas of how many of you feel like you have Shadow SaaS under control? Okay, and I can see the votes flying in there, so thank you very much everyone for answering. And interestingly, Joe, we've got 0% of people who feel that they're fully in control of this problem. So it gives us a sort of good feeling about doing these sorts of webinars today. So
yeah, I think we've got some humble viewers. And
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if we thank you, anyone that hasn't voted, we'll leave that open for a little while, and we'll share the poll results at the end of this session. Okay, but for the moment, what we're going to do is we're going to go and have a look at some technology now and show you what Certero do as part of SaaS discovery.